Happy Thanksgiving to all my magical miscreants out there. Today's video is going to be about the turkeys of recent Magic history. Now, a turkey in this case is a card that got hyped up. Everybody's like, it's going to break this format or that format. And then it just kind of was, okay. It's merely good or just eh. But in this case, the list is agnostic. It doesn't cover just exclusively Commander, though it does have a Commander-heavy tilt.
Then over here you have favoritism.
Yes, I show favoritism, so sue me. It's my favorite format. So with that said, let's begin the list. First up on the list, we have Plaza of Heroes. It's a land that taps for a colorless. It also has the ability to tap for any color if you're playing a legendary spell. It also can tap for any color that a legendary permanent you control has in it. And you can pay 3 to protect your creatures from destruction effects and that kind of stuff. And it also gives it indestructible as well. This card coming out of Dominaria United just had a ton of hype. Commander players everywhere were declaring that it was going to be a $50 card, that everybody was going to need a copy of it, and it was just going to be busted all over, and they probably needed to ban it because it was quote-unquote too good. Well, truth is, it's only about a $7.50 card as of this recording. It's not as ubiquitous as everybody thought it was going to be. It's not in every deck, and there's a few reasons why. First off, to get any colored mana out of it, you either have to be playing a legend of some sort, so really only your commander most of the time, or to get colored mana out of it, to do other things, you had to have a legend on the board. So it's a little restrictive to actually get the mana colors you need out of it. On top of that, the ability to protect your creatures, you can only do it once, and then it's exiled from the game. And second of all, holding up 3 mana all the time is very restrictive and hard to do, and there are better spells for a single mana that can do the same thing. Another more recent card that Commander players just kind of lost their mind on, you'd almost think they got into a stash of Moonshine.
Spuckler, Family Moonshine!
And that is Bootlegger's Stash. For 5 and a green, you get an artifact that says that your land's getting the ability to tap and create a treasure token. Well, you know, that's great and then fine and dandy and all, but it never really took off. It never broke the game. It was ordering for around $30 when New Capenna released, and now it's probably right around a $6 to $7 card, which is probably where it should have been in the first place. Every green deck isn't using it. Every green deck doesn't need it. There are better, more efficient mana and ramp spells available to green decks. The decks that actually want this card, even then, aren't really breaking it or anything. The best deck for this thing is probably Chatterfang Squirrel General, because then you can tap your lands to create treasure tokens and therefore squirrel tokens off of Chatterfang, or some kind of deck that abuses treasure tokens in some way, shape, or form. And it just never really took off, and people lost their freaking minds over it. Who knows why, but here we are. Sticking with green, let's move on to another recent card that people lost their freaking mind over because it tripled mana output, and that is Nyx Bloom Ancient. For 4 and triple green, you get a 5/5 elemental with trample that says whenever a source you control taps for mana, you triple the amount that it created instead. So if you tap a land for mana, it produces 3, and people thought this was going to, oh my god, it's going to break the format! It never did. People were treating this thing like it was going to be as bad as Primeval Titan, if you don't know what that is. It got banned because it would just take over a game because you're just weeding lands out of your deck, and it helped get you better draws and accelerated you far faster than everybody else, and people were comparing this to that. The truth is far less glamorous. First off, even if you cast a Primeval Titan, you at least got the 2 lands off of it if they blew it out of the water. And then it would just snowball later as it attacked and got things going. This does nothing on its own. It has 0 effect on the board if you can't untap your lands, if you don't get to untap with it on the board, or anything like that. So there's no immediate effect out of this card. On top of that, it's triple green, meaning your deck has to tilt mono green or very heavy green to cast it with any kind of consistency. Besides that, there are other things in the game that increase your mana output through your lands usually, such as Zendikar Resurgent, where you get double the mana tapped instead of triple, but you also get a card draw trigger off of that card, and there's other things like Mana Reflection and things like that that do the same thing, and you don't have to worry about it being a creature getting blown out of its boots right away, because enchantment removal is not used as heavily in the Commander format. It probably should be, hint hint, but in this case, this thing just got overhyped and it never really got caught on. Now, this is a $17 card as of recording, but it was going for much more than that just a few months back, and now it's just basically a commander card that gets used in a few green decks that care about mana acceleration, but not every single green deck uses it. Let's get away from green for a little bit and look at Lord Xander the Collector. Now, when this was previewed during the New Capenna spoiler season and all of the demon crime bosses were revealed, some people were very excited to build around new 3-color legends for their commanders. But this one got a lot of people grumbling about how busted it was and how unfair it is as a card. Lord Xander is a 6/6 vampire demon noble for 4, a red, a black, and a blue that says when it enters the battlefield, target opponent discards half their hand rounded down. When it attacks, the player being attacked mills half their library rounded down. And if he dies, target opponent loses half of their permanents rounded down. Now, that's a very powerful set of effects. But there's a few problems with this. First off, he costs 7 mana. Unless you're dedicating your deck to exclusively cheating this thing out as early as turn like 1 or 2, which means he actually has to be in the 99. He can't be actually in your command zone to pull this kind of shenanigan off. You're not going to get a maximum effect, because by the time you drop him on the board at 7 mana, most players have already emptied their hands or gotten down to a low amount, and you might only catch one player who might be hoarding cards to get maximum effect of the discard trigger. The milling trigger in Commander isn't as powerful as it would be in a 40 or a 60 card format, and the death trigger, if somebody knows it's coming, they're just going to hold back what they can and not walk into it and let somebody else take that bullet when the thing explodes. So he never got to be this grand, oh my god, this is going to kill everything in Commander, we're losing our minds type mindset. And he's only worth a couple of bucks as of the time of this recording. So I don't get what the hype was on this card, but it was there. Speaking of overhyped New Capenna cards, we have Ob Nixilis the Adversary. In Standard, this was being compared to being the new Oko. You weren't around for that during the Eldraine years, or you just heard about it in whispers, consider yourself lucky. Oko was the most busted card almost ever printed. That thing broke into Legacy. It was so bad. And it's only legal in Commander basically these days because it was just so overpowered. And people were comparing this to that card. But the truth is, it's far from that. Early on in the seasons, it actually, was in the game. It was in there being used in Rakdos Sacrifice and stuff. And nowadays, you might see maybe 1 or 2 copies in those decks, but there are bigger, better cards, and this just really wasn't that used in the end. For those who don't know what he does or what he is, he's a Planeswalker for 1, a red and a black, same converted mana cost as Oko, 3. Starts with 3 loyalty, has casualty X, which means you could sacrifice a creature when it came into play, and it would create a copy of itself with loyalty equal to the power of the creature that was sacrificed. You can +1 him, each opponent loses 2 life, and then you get, unless they discarded a card, and then you gain 2 life if you controlled a demon or a devil card. You could -2 to create a 1/1 devil, and then when the devil died, it dealt 1 damage to any target, or you could -7 to make somebody draw 7 cards and lose 7 life. So you kind of had like a semi-finisher that you could use to either fill your hand back up at the cost of your life, or finish somebody off that was down at 7 or below and just hit them in the face with it. But it just never really took off. It's like, the discard was great and all, but now we have things like Liliana the Veil in the standard format that are just better overall because you can take more advantage of it. You don't have to worry about splashing the red. It has a creature removal attached to it, unlike this thing. And just overall, it was a very overhyped card. Very powerful, don't get me wrong, but the hype just didn't meet what was happening at the time. Sticking with a black-colored creature, and it's the last one of our turkey list this year, is Doom Whisperer. Now, remember when this thing was on pre-release for like $25 and everybody and their brother was like, oh, this is going to be a great finisher for like Dimir Control and stuff like that? Yeah, it never really panned out. For those who don't know what Doom Whisperer is, for 3 black, you get a 6/6 flying trample demon that says pay 2 life, surveil 2. Now, if you don't know what surveil is, surveil means you look at the top whatever amount number is listed, in this case 2 cards, you put any number of them in your graveyard and the rest back on top of your library. So everybody's like, oh, this is great card selection, you can dig through your deck, you get a 6/6 flying trample threat, yada yada yada. Problem is there was a lot of life being lost in those formats because of the shock land and mana bases that we had. So people were taking dings off of those. Then you were trying to, shock yourself to dig into your deck, and eventually you got yourself so low you put yourself into lethal range of all the aggro decks that were running around at the time. So this never really took off. It was just pretty much a 6/6 flying trample for 5, and that's not really all that great when you're trying to look for a good finisher. And eventually Esper picked up a little bit later on down the line and got things like Dream Trawler and things like that to be able to punch through and do much better things for the mana spent. Now, I know there's more turkeys out there that were printed in the last 4 or 5 years. I'd love to know what you think they are down in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching, everybody. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Go out there, have some real turkey, unlike these turkeys, and have a great day and a happy holiday.